In this video we're going to look at what's new in ERS Studio version 19.1.1 and how it integrates with WhereScape, bringing immense power to the design, build and deployment of data warehouses. So we're going to give you a quick overview of ERS Studio and WhereScape first, and then we'll look at how they fit together and jump into a demo where we'll see an ERS Studio model push to WhereScape to generate all the necessary codes to deploy to a target data platform. And we'll include data masking rules based on security information captured in ERS Studio and ETL or ELT code generated to populate it, applying standard data warehousing patterns for building up a history of all changes in the source data. So first of all, quick summary on what is ERS Studio. So ERS Studio is a tool for data architects to design and document data assets. It's an enterprise tool, so we can design and document many data assets and many data architects doing that documentation and design work. We support many different data products. Our backgrounds in relational databases, moving into more file-based formats and newer data technologies like NoSQL. We've got a secondary mission to be able to connect those data architects with data governance and data analytics projects. And the idea is we're going to have a single interconnected company-wide data ecosystem. So wherever we go in that ecosystem, whichever group we talk to, whichever tool is involved in there, they're all going to give you the same answers and be collaborating the knowledge on data and data assets. So ERS Studio itself, there's two main components. We've got Data Architect and Team Server. Data Architect is the thick client products where our data modelers are going to be creating those data models. So going through the gears of creating conceptual, logical and then physical data models and transforming between them, generating code for databases, managing the change process throughout that. And all of the data assets that they're modeling going to be perhaps creating those and mapping them against a enterprise conceptual and enterprise logical data model. And Data Architect, if we've got a team of users, we might want to bring them together and share their models in a central repository. So Team Server provides that central repository. We also have Team Server Core, which is a web-based component that allows you to publish those models to a wider audience, and also includes a business glossary and a data catalog. And you'll see in some of the previous releases the work that we've been doing connecting those into industry standard data governance tools like Calibra, for instance. So whereas ERS Studio is a tool set for general data architects, WhereScape's a tool set for data warehouse architects. And they're going to use that to completely automate the design and creation and the operation of a data warehouse. So the tool allows you to reverse engineer a data source, create a model of it, and apply metadata to that model. And then using that metadata, you can apply standard templates that then generate the schema of the data warehouse. And it'll support most standard schema formats such as Kimball or Inman approaches, and we're particularly strong in the Data Vault schema. And not only will it generate the schema of the static elements of the data warehouse, it'll also generate all the data movements throughout the warehouse, all the ELT operations. So because of these templates, then you can apply repeatable best practices and industry standards. And it really does increase the throughput and reduce the cost of building the warehouse, especially with schema formats like Data Vault. And as it goes through, it then documents your warehouse and creates lineage, so you can understand where did it come from, where's it going to, and really help with fault finding. It's agnostic of whatever technology you want to run your database platform on. And because of that, it future-proofs your data warehouse. If you do change your platform, again, because it's all model-driven, you can then just run all the automations and port to a new platform very easily and very quickly. In terms of components of WhereScape, so there's three real products there. WhereScape 3D is the design tool that allows you to build models of your data assets. So it has lots of really good data modeling capabilities. Red is the engine that executes the execution of those templates and creates the data structures and data movements. And Data Vault Express is a simplified package really set up to support Data Vault. So with ERS Studio version 19.1.1, we can now push models to WhereScape 3D, which can use the ERS Studio metadata to drive all sorts of automations in the design and build of the various flavors of data warehouses, data marts or data vaults, etc. So let's look at the mission. So on this slide here, you can see on the left-hand side we've got data sources. We've got applications with their databases, we've got semi-structured data, and we want to get that into our warehouse, so our BI and analytics teams and tools and systems over on the right hand side can consume that data. So we want to be able to create the warehouse, both the static regions, and we might have multiple regions in the warehouse like we have in the diagram there, and also the data movement, so those green lines on the diagram. Now WhereScape, as we mentioned earlier, will allow you to automate that process. So with WhereScape 3D, I can point it to one of the operational data stores on the left-hand side, reverse engineer it and create a physical model of that. Great. And then from that physical model, the data warehouse architects using WhereScape can apply some useful metadata to that to describe what are the characteristics of the data elements in the model. And then from those characteristics, the automations then kick in, create the regions of the warehouse, deploy those to the database server that's hosting the warehouse, create the data movements, the ELT operations, and off we go. We've got a data warehouse. Now, the challenge with this is two parts. First of all, when we reverse engineer the database, we're not going to necessarily understand, well, what is the data in here? From the metadata that we've pulled in, it might be using technical abbreviated names. So the data warehouse architect needs to go off, speak to people, read documentation, and understand the nature of the database in the source asset. The second thing is they need to gather important characteristics of that information, such as sensitivity, is this PII data, any useful metrics that can allow us to define what are the rules that apply to the data in the warehouse. WhereScape can use those pieces of information to then automate the creation of security profiles, either data masking profiles or allocation to security schemas only certain users can access. So this is where ER Studio comes in. So ER Studio can first of all allow you to understand, well, what information is in a data asset, and then what rules applies to it. So looking at the little diagram there, we've got a business glossary and a data dictionary forming our data catalog. So we can allow our business users to then browse for data assets and see which assets contains the information that they're looking for, and that's done in the business glossary. And then we can use that knowledge to say, well, where is this data? And then make a decision to include that asset in the warehouse. Now, what we want to be able to do is to provide WhereScape a nicely marked up model of that data asset containing business-friendly markup such as business names, descriptions, and also useful metadata that comes from the data governance project. So against the business glossary, we're going to be holding useful metadata like PII flags and sensitivity levels. So if we look at the next few diagrams, so here is a physical data model of a data asset, and as we were saying, we can look at this and we really don't get an idea of what is the data in this asset. I've got a table called cust and a column C_RTNG. What is that? Now in ER Studio we've been designing this asset in the first place, so we might have started from a logical data model. Maybe we documented it with ER Studio, so we reversed engineered it and then we created the logical data model. But here with the mappings between the objects, I can clearly see that the cust table is a customer table, and C_RTNG is credit rating score. So that's the first part of the useful metadata that we've got available in ER Studio. Now the next part is our business glossary. So again, the data architect using ER Studio, supporting the data governance projects, as maps all the attributes in our logical data model, or even directly against the physical data model, and connected them to business terms. The data stewards that own the business glossary would have applied those useful pieces of metadata to the terms. Again, credit rating score might have a PII flag against it, and also a sensitivity level of critical. So what we're going to do in our new integration, so we can push models, that physical model on the right hand side, push it to WhereScape. And not only that, we can collapse into it the useful metadata that we hold in the business glossary. So all those logical names, logical descriptions, we can include that as markup against the physical model. Now again, if we've got business terms attached, we can collapse that into the model as well and send that all as markup to WhereScape. And if we've mapped business terms directly, also collapse that in. So that's our mission. We're going to send to WhereScape a fully marked up physical model of the data assets with all that useful metadata that's going to help the data warehouse architect make decisions on, do I want to include this table or this piece of information in the warehouse? And then what sort of characteristics do I need to know about to be able to drive security? So let's look at a demo. We'll first look at how ERS Studio curates the data, then WhereScape's going to help you design, build and deploy physical tables and code in the warehouse. So this is Team Server. In Team Server I can maintain a glossary of business terms. If I look for a particular business term here, salary, and there is a business term. There's the various pieces of metadata that we've captured about salary. So I've got a definition, descriptive example, personally identifiable information, sensitivity level is critical. Okay, so lots of useful metadata around the business term. Now this could have been created in Team Server itself, or could have come from Calibra. So we've got our new synchronization mechanism with Calibra. We're doing the same sort of thing with other data governance tools. So we've got a business glossary of rules around our information. At the same time, in Data Architect here, I've been creating models of my data assets. So we've designed this database using ERS Studio Data Architect. This is the physical model. Up here I've got the logical model of it against each of these business terms. If we open up employee, I've got a glossary tab. So I've mapped my entities, my attributes to those business terms in my glossary. So there's all my useful information to start off with. So what I can do then is I can go and browse for information. So as a user, I might be interested in a particular piece of information. Let's look for party. So with party, I can read the definition. I can then drill down through a taxonomy of terms in party. Party could be a party role or a party type. Party role could be competitor, customer, employee. So for my employee, great, this is the information that I'm looking for. Now I want to know, well, where is this information in terms of all of my data models? So this is telling me that employee lives within 4 different data models. If I expand this particular data model, I can see I've got a logical model and a physical model. Within the logical, I've got an entity called employee, and in this physical model for my training database, I've got a table called EMP. So what I could do here right now is say, okay, well this database here contains employee information. This is what I'm looking for. I could go and explore this model in more detail. So I can see all the different tables within it, etc. Immediately I can make a decision. Right, I want this in WhereScape. So the next step is very simple. I can choose to export this to WhereScape. I click yes, and then I'll start the process to generate the XML file and download it to my machine, which I can then open in WhereScape 3D. And there's my file. I've got a lot of control over what information I can pass to WhereScape. So here I can choose how those models are collapsed. So I've chosen to export a physical data model. I can choose to collapse in logical object properties connected, and also business terms connected to either the logical or directly to the physical. I can choose what properties I send across. So for my column here, I've got various different properties inside ERS Studio. I can choose which of those will become both the core properties inside WhereScape and what I want to send over as extended properties. And if we expand business terms attached to the attributes, I can see that those properties I was looking at against the business term, like PII flags, sensitivity flags, I can choose to send over. And these are all going to appear as extended properties. And those extended properties will then drive automations within WhereScape 3D. So, and all of these properties are customizable. I can add whatever I want into Team Server. Again, this information might be coming from another data governance tool like Calibra or Informatica. And I can choose to pass those straight through to WhereScape. So let's go and have a look and see what happens inside WhereScape.
Let us now see how we can use that ERS Studio model and further design and build our data warehouse. So within WhereScape 3D, we can import that model into one of our source models. A prerequisite would be to set up the connection where that data is housed. This is in order to fully automate the process of loading the data from that source. So what I will do is I will import the model into my HR source. I've already created the HR source, but I will create a new version for this demonstration and just link it to that connection I've set up. but I'm not going to discover the source because I'd like to import it from ERS Studio. I can then use a workflow button to import from ERS Studio model. That is the model that I'm interested in. So now I can see all of the information that has been sent from ERS Studio together with the extended properties that could be of use in designing and building our data warehouse. Now, not all of this information might be useful, but what we will focus on today is specifically the personally identifiable information as well as the sensitivity level. So in order to make that more visible, I'm going to just run a model conversion rule to highlight the sensitive information. So now you will see all of the sensitive fields deemed as personally identifiable or critical or some sort of sensitivity on them as red. Now I would like to manage them in a different way in my data warehouse. You can also do some other things. So let's say I want to exclude some tables. I am not interested in, for example, this external agency table. I can tag it to be ignored in my data warehouse. And let's take employee skills matrix as well. In this demo, I want to demonstrate how you can generate an ODS model, which either tracks history or does not track history. So I would now like to select some fields that I deem is not important to track history on. So let's say the name of the department, and let's just take some other arbitrary field like agency ID. So you can now go through this process iteratively by either adding some additional metadata, ignoring some tables, or giving any other attributes that might be useful in generating the ODS model. Now, I am showing an ODS model, but this could very well be a demonstration on how you maybe generate dimensions and facts or a data vault, whatever the architecture is of your data warehouse. Next step would be to use our pre-built model conversion rules to generate the ODS. So this will run through model conversion rules to turn this third normal form or ERD type diagram and metadata into an ODS model. It will also add some security items based on these sensitivity fields and some housekeeping rules, taking away some unnecessary metadata. Just going to go with the defaults for now. So now I can see that in this demo model, there was load tables generated. So this is the one-to-one mapping of the source data into my target platform. This is the physical model that will be built. Still target agnostic at this point. This is the ODS layer, so the data store objects, either non-historized, the lighter color, or historized. So in the historized ones, you will see an end date and a current flag. And then views on top of that for my current views. So this will just take the latest record from my historized views. Now I can either deploy to different targets. For this demo, I'm going to deploy to a Microsoft SQL target. This will invoke our admin tool. I have to select the target repository for the metadata. This will now do a comparison with my metadata associated with my target platform. All is new at this stage. I'm going to take the defaults. So now if I refresh my metadata within our builder tool, you will see the ERS generated ODS has now been created. So these are all the objects that has been modeled, imported from ER Studio and further modeled in WhereScape 3D. I can take this and create a job from it. I'm going to take the default settings. This is proposing a lineage based on the model designed in 3D. I'm just going to say, okay, I'm happy with that proposed lineage. And I'm going to kick off the job that will start loading my data warehouse. So what has happened in the last couple of minutes? We've taken the model, we've imported it, enhanced it a bit, generated the ODS layer, and what's happened now in the background, it's created the DDL, creating these objects in my target platform. It has generated procedures to update the data, all based on templates. It has figured out what the lineage is, in other words, the dependencies, in which order it needs to load. And now I'm running this job that actually will load the data warehouse for me. So while that is running, I can also show you the documentation. So we generate the documentation based on the metadata automatically. So we can create the documentation. WhereScape produces two flavors of the documentation, a user level documentation, as well as a technical documentation. The technical documentation is what I'm more interested in. This will show me all of the update procedures, all of the technical names, all of the lineage. You can go to the procedures, look at the actual code that was generated. So this is the procedure that was generated in the background to update my historized data store object. And maybe something else interesting is based on the sensitivity level, I could tell my target platform via a template how it needs to handle those security measures. So in this instance, what we did was the fields marked as sensitive, I was able to create a masking policy or a masking over those fields, and only users with the appropriate privileges would be able to see the data in these columns that were marked as sensitive. So just to go back to 3D and show you what we did, we imported the model, we tagged the metadata appropriately, some additional metadata for history tracking, excluded certain tables. Another option for generating the ODS or the security measures within the ODS So you'll see the default is the masking option. What we could have done, we could create some secure views on top of the ODS. This will simply exclude the sensitive fields, and then these secure views will be put into a separate schema where users that have the appropriate privileges can have access. For the data store objects, then it would only be for users with elevated privileges. Now this is just two options. You can write your own rules based on your own maybe security architecture that you would like and how you want to manage your secure or personally identifiable fields. It's really up to you. Additional thing, if I go to my model, my newly generated model here, you will see in the list of all objects, now there has been some additional secure views created based on that setting that I've selected. What you will also see is I could have deployed it to Snowflake, and Snowflake would perhaps have a slightly different way of masking the data. You need to create a masking policy, but the alter table and column statements are quite similar. So in that case, you would have a template that would handle the security in the appropriate way. So really, you can take a model from ERS Studio, and within a couple of minutes, by simply adding or enhancing some of the metadata, you can generate it to your target platform and load it for your end users to view the data.
So what do we see in the demonstration? We saw how we could browse Team Server, and we looked through the business glossary for information on employees. We found a database, and then we ran the export. And in that export was the physical model of that database, but we'd added in all of the markup from the logical data model and the business glossary. So we got a lot of useful business metadata, the logical names for things, the descriptions. We also chose to pull in a number of security requirements and parameters over from the business glossary created by the data governance team. And this could have come all the way from our data governance tool like Calibra, for instance. So we then took that model, we imported it into WhereScape 3D, and we viewed the model. And we could see a nice logical diagram of the model based on that markup that we'd included. And we used that information to then decide which information do we want to put into the warehouse, the curation process. We then ran some automations that then took that markup coming from ERS Studio to create the data warehouse. And based on those parameters from the data governance team, we then created secure views and masked data. And then we also automatically created the ELT pipeline to load the data warehouse. So we already know that WhereScape can dramatically reduce the time taken to build a data warehouse through metadata-driven automations, but we've reduced that time further still. So normally WhereScape 3D users would have to reverse engineer the database and then gather business metadata and useful metadata about the data asset. So we've taken away a lot of that effort by leveraging the knowledge of our data architects. The second benefit is that we've improved the governance workflow of the warehouse creation. So we've taken requirements and parameters from the data governance team, potentially from tools like Calibra, and we've used that to automatically create security profiles within the warehouse. For more information, come and find us at sales@idera.com. Thanks for listening.